Hello, everyone. This is Pras, and we are here talking about analytics. This is Solio Analytics. It's a new podcast. It's part of a new platform that you will be seeing in the very near future. And I'm very delighted to be joined by Johnny Curry, who's my co host on this podcast on a weekly basis. Johnny, how are you?
I'm very well, Praz. I was going to say thanks for having me on. I'm so used to being guests on these
I
podcasts. This
guess.
is our own one. I've done all the tech setup. So if the audio is a bit funny, you can blame me. But yeah, very excited to be starting this. First of many, hopefully. How are you feeling?
Yes. Yeah, very excited. Obviously, the season started, and very excited about the platform. And everyone's been receiving newsletters. They've been hearing about Solio. They've been looking at the Solio graphics in these Rob T, graphics that he's been putting out. So we're here. We can't yet share everything, but we're here first to talk about Solio a little bit, and we will then talk about the season because FPL is here. The goal of this podcast that we will try to do is essentially bring analytics to the masses, to essentially make sure that people who are today a little bit skeptical about analytics, scared about analytics, or even deniers of analytics, maybe they get to hear the other side of the story. Maybe they get to learn a little bit, and hopefully through the tools, through this podcast, we can bring analytics to the masses. That's the goal that we have. But before I get into Solio, let's get into who you're looking at or who you're talking to. So Johnny, do you want to introduce yourself in terms of your history with the game? And it's not just FPL; it's a lot of games. So why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, I may well be an FPL addict, fantasy addict. I play a lot. Someone with too much time on my hands is how I try and describe it when people give me credit for some of my good finishes. But yeah, I've been playing fantasy Premier League since I can remember. Really, there was a period at university where I didn't play as much, but I definitely played back at school. Played the match magazine fantasy games. I think
Right.
I'm not quite old enough to have needed to send in stuff via the post.
The Telegram.
But I'm sure my dad did a little bit back in the day. Yeah, I then started taking it a bit more seriously through university and a bit later on. And last 3 or 4 seasons have been playing many other games as well. So I played the Telegraph fantasy football game. Was fortunate enough, to win that last year. And I played Sun Dream Team as well. Did my first season of that last year. Came in the top 50, I think. Which meant I could finish first in the Ultimate Fantasy Manager, which was the highest across FPL and Telegraph and Dream Team. Play a lot of Fan Team as well. I'm just listing off. They all sound quite similar as well. My friends ask me how fantasy football's going, and I don't really have a very succinct answer for them anymore. I think that's when I realized I was like, what? I don't know yet. A goal goes in, and it's like, well, that's good here and bad there, and sort of a portfolio now it does dampen the effects a little bit. But yeah, last 3 seasons in FPL, I finished 909th, about 2.5k and about 10k last year. The 909th as well I was first on FPL reviews, massive data rankings, if anyone's familiar with that. So I've had some quite good, underlying data, I suppose. Seasons 2, I definitely play in that way. I'll build my own models for these other games where they're not available, or work with a few friends who do similar stuff. But yeah, I love building models. I love optimizing. I love finding new strategies for things. I think I was talking to a few friends the other day about some of the FPL strategies we might be playing, and some of them come up and they just sound a bit stupid. And I think that gets me excited more so than the other way. Right. I think if it looks dumb but makes sense underlying, then that I'm like, cool, yes, I want to play 5 at the back this week. I want to play my assistant manager through a blank game week and do all these sort of slightly odd strategies that I probably wouldn't have found if I hadn't been crunching the numbers, so to speak. But yeah.
I think what strikes me as somebody following you for the last 2-3 years is not only do you follow analytics, which a lot of people have started to do, so that's one thing, but you also have a higher risk threshold. You basically play with risk as well. So somebody like me who will go on to an analytical tool, who look at what my most optimal move is, you will actually play around with that and say, maybe if I don't do that, can I still capture close to that expected value or expected points, as people would know it? through something else. Maybe I can captain a Palmer instead of everybody going Salah. Of course, it has its high risk, high reward, but also, you can obviously get burnt if it doesn't work out. But that's been a big part of your play. So that's been something you've consciously done, or that's just your style?
I'm not really sure. I feel like I kind of stumbled onto it. I think having had that top 1K, top massive data season of like kind of everything went right for me, for one. Like, I think I had triple Man United when we got an unexpected double game week early. So I was just well set. And then
Right.
my players didn't get injured. So as well as like, okay, I've played quite well, the things that allowed me to then have a few transfers later, it just all came together. And I kind of thought, I'm probably not going to have a better season than that. I might get luckier in another season, but I'm probably not going to have it just all fall for me in the way that the paths, the clearings just opened up repeatedly.
Right.
So the following season, I thought, okay, like how different can we go? Can we play Jay in a different way? So like another thing I can add on. And that allowed me to try and take some really unusual paths. I think I captained Hwang Hee-chan in a game against Sheffield United when everyone had gone for Haaland and Salah and stuff, and wildcarded without Haaland, and started to partly like you get a bit more attention on Twitter as well. But I quite like the why has he done that? But then they think about it and then they realize, oh, it kind of makes sense.
Makes sense.
Like if they say that looks, as I said, that looks silly, but on second thought, no, it works. I think I quite liked getting that kind of reaction. And also, once I started playing a few other games that were a bit more competitive or had money on the line, sort of cash leagues and prizes and stuff, FPL's like more for fun. And my friends are playing it and it's more to do with the experience. Then I thought, oh, why not like experiment a bit here? And there's learnings from other games I can bring across and learnings I can take the other way. Actually, if I can try something in FPL, because ultimately if it doesn't work, so be it. But then that allowed me to feel much more comfortable when I get into these spots in like sort of, 5 game weeks to go. I'm in the top 10 of another game trying to win it. I go, okay, well, I've tried this in FPL. I've done this. Like, it's the playground for me to some extent. But yes, I think it's also a nice way to think about the game. And that's what's kind of brought us to this tool as well, because a few of the guys in the team like playing like that. And that's where we started talking about personalizing analytics and having your own touch on it rather than it being, I think it's sort of misbranded sometimes as here's the answer, or like it's telling you what to do, or you just copy and follow it, and actually realizing that it can also be a tool to be quite self-expressive and explore, and it's fun.
Exactly. And look, over the course of the season, I'm excited to sort of see how you use risk and you take different paths. And, I'm looking forward to that. And hopefully people listening here will as well, hopefully learn from you in terms of how to calibrate risk. But let's move. Well, I should, for people
Yourself,
who don't know me.
I'll ask you in return. Can you introduce yourself, please, Brad?
Yes, of course. I have played FPL for 15 years now. This is my 15th year. So the day I came to London, 2010, is when I started playing FPL. It was August, so the season was just starting. So I remember it well. And I have basically been through this journey of, which a lot of people have, which is going from, I have a hunch of playing FPL, so I just like this guy, I'm going to pick them, to then becoming a little bit more planning oriented, planning my transfers. But it was all manual. And so I thought, in the teens, I think, 2013 to 2019, I went through a phase of doing a lot of Excel work. I was looking at my team. I was planning what it looks like in 5 game weeks. What transfers do I need to make? And then there was the dawn of the models, right? It was basically, I didn't need to make the Excel anymore. I could actually see my team. I could plan things better. What I was doing manually, calculators were now available to help me with that. But I still, at the core of it, remain a very fixtures oriented guy, which at the heart of it, every model does, because good fixture equals high expected points or expected value. So I feel I've been playing analytically without using models for a very long time. But then what I will try to do in this podcast, and this is why I would like the non-analytic managers also to give it a go, is that I'll try to bring the other side. I will try to show why it's also good to watch the games. It's also good to basically have an understanding, because it all translates into assumptions. It could translate into assumptions of expected minutes. You could have a tool such as Solio where if you don't believe in certain underlyings, you could change them. you could basically decide, maybe I don't think this player is as good. So I think I'll bring that perspective of people who haven't used models as much, and I'll, question sometimes if the answer is the right answer, or do we need to tweak it. So rank histories and stuff, yeah, it's fine. Like, I've had a few good ranks,
They're quite good.
and I mean, it's, I think the longer you play, the more you realize you have a few lucky years. As long as you keep making good decisions, you should end up in the top 1% of the game. And in the very good years, if you don't take risk and you play it the similar way, you'll have a consistently good rank history. And so that basically I have. And but I want to do better. I want to understand risk a little better, and I want to basically use what I've learned so far and see if I can actually push for the very, very high ranks. Like, as it turns out, I've got probably 9 top 25Ks, but the highest rank I've ever had is 4K. So I
All
know
right.
it's a nice problem to have, but it's not like, I would aspire to get that triple digit rank at some point. So it's something that is my goal. Whether you get it or not obviously depends on luck, but that's where I want to be, and that's what I perceive my FPL journey to be.
We can all learn more. We can all progress. I think it's the journey that's more exciting, and going along with other people and process. I think process oriented is something I really advocate for. I think that's
Yeah.
the fun bit. The results will come and go, and we can enjoy them. But yeah, obviously, good results are nice. Like, good process leads to good results on the whole. But
Absolutely.
yes,
Absolutely.
that's the plan.
So today we're going to talk about what Solio is. So a very short segment of what we can say about the model, what are we building as a tool. But I think the core of the discussion will be on FPL. The game is launched, new rules. There's changes in how defenders score points, how many transfers you have in chips. So there's a lot to talk about. But let's start with Solio. I want to get, you've worked a lot with, the core team, which is James, Sertalp, you have Chris, you have obviously Jorgen. So with the team, and Rob T has joined recently as well. So with the team, what can you tell us in terms of what you're building?
Yeah, so it was Jorgen, James, and Sertalp and I who sort of co-founded it initially as an idea. I think James and Sertalp have really been talking about, can they make what they're doing into a tool for a few years. But then Sertalp was like, okay, well, I don't know how to do this bit, I don't know how to do that bit. And then he started meeting more and more people in the community, and he's like, oh, actually, this guy's good at this thing, and this guy's good at this thing. And suddenly he was like, I think we've got a team here that we can build our own thing. And we felt like there was some places in the market that weren't really offering what we wanted, or what we felt that a lot of people would really enjoy. And again, this kind of like analytics journey over the last few seasons has been something where more and more people are picking it up, but maybe there's still a few misconceptions or more things we can do with it, or I don't want to say people misusing it. I don't mean that in an accusatory way, but I think like people there's more for people to learn, and actually misuse is sometimes quite good. It's like people are trying to do something, they just haven't quite learned that, and we all did that at the start. Our conceptions build and build and build, but actually suddenly there's this community. So Solio is a community driven project. We're self-funded. We haven't taken any large fundings on, but we want to like build a project. It's a hobby project that's kind of becoming a business now, so we're sort of transitioning over to that point. So we thought, okay, like we really want to bring analytics to more people and help them understand it. And one of the biggest qualms people tend to have is that it doesn't reflect what I think. It's just someone's telling me what they think and what I should do, and I should follow that. So what we really wanted to do is to give people like their own touch on it. So we're going to give people much more access to start tinkering with the pieces under the hood. So as you said, if you disagree with team strengths or team projected goals, player projected goals, all this kind of thing, we want the model to be something that people can feel as their own. So lots of people, when they get started in analytics, want to stay, if they've got a handle of spreadsheets and stuff, is they try and build their own model. And then they realize that it gets a bit complicated and confusing, and then they give up. I think that's kind of a rite of passage. But we want people who don't have the technical know-how, but have the thoughts of, I think this team's this good and this team's this good. And that's what a lot of the game is, to be able to go, okay, like what does a projection model look like from my head? How do I get this into a working system. So that's the main plan with the prediction model. But also we wanted to give people more flexible ways of planning. So with FPL, like it's kind of this ping pong between you make a decision and then you get some information, and then you make a decision and you get some information game week to game week. And it's a little more continuous than that. Like throughout the, maybe you have to make a transfer early for a price change or something like that. But on the whole, most people are making transfers on the final day. The games happen at the weekend. We get midweek, other games, press conferences, and then you go, okay, I have my decision. So it's this back and forth, back and forth. But each time your opponent, the FPL themselves, the Premier League, makes their move, gives you some information, matches happen, points happen, someone gets injured, someone's playing further forward, team looks better than you thought they might do, then it's then on you to go, okay, like that's going to affect the move I make after that. So if you can conceive of a few different scenarios of like, okay, what would happen if fixtures was a big one. So actually we started to think about the permutations of the fixtures, and Ben Crellin and James from Planet FPL and Ian Parran and Tala and all these guys have been really good on giving us the sort of permutations. But actually, can you plan for, I'll know whether the fixture goes here or here at this point. So I need a plan that's going to allow me to pivot at that point rather than this one track linear plan. So we want to give people more flexible planning tools, because it's not this deterministic one thing happens, one thing happens, one thing happens. Otherwise, you could lock your team in game week 1 and you could put your 38 moves in and hope for the best. That's why we come back every week. You get more information. So you want to be in a good position to plan for all of this. So we want a tool that allows you to plan flexibly and bring optimization and models and analytics into how you treat that as well.
And a good real life example is, let's look at it now. Like we're seeing, let's take an example of Brentford for instance. So you're seeing that they've lost their manager, they've lost, their goalkeeper, their key talisman, they may lose Wissa. And so essentially somebody may go on to a model and say, the team strength for Brentford looks off. I think they're going to get relegated this year. And there've been quite a few shouts of people saying Brentford might get relegated this year. So if you genuinely believe that, then having the flexibility in a model to say, you know what, I'm going to change. People already dabble with this. They look at fixture tickers and they go, okay, I'm going to make Brentford a 2 as a fixture difficulty on this. Well, here what you're doing is basically in your projection model, you can say whenever your player plays Brentford, maybe their expected points will go up. So you can adjust that. So having that flexibility already, I think to your point, gives you that freedom, that ability to basically have a say, actually use your football knowledge and do that. Now, you could overcorrect, and that's a classic mistake, but at least you have the flexibility to do that.
Yeah, and you can take ownership for your own decisions. You're in control. So if you think Brentford are a little bit worse, then we'll help you extrapolate what that opinion means. So if I make Brentford a little bit worse, then suddenly this guy's the better captain when they play them in another week. So actually the team that you might want is going to have a different premium, and that means you have to pick a different forward. No, actually, there's all these ripple effects, and it's really complicated to work out. But if we can build an ecosystem that people can pull the strings of, then that's really what we want to provide people with. I think it's also important to note that this isn't just for analytics people. Like, we think those people will love it as well, but also this is for everyone. So if you're just getting started, you want to explore it, or even if you just want a planning tool that allows you to make these sort of flexible plans and paths, and you don't actually have to use the projection model stuff itself. You can actually just use it as, I want to plan for what if this happens, what if this happens, what if this happens, rather than you end up with like 40 odd screenshots in your phone. Actually, like if you could build that into a one structured plan, it's like decision nodes going this way, that way. I think it'll make more sense once people get their hands on it. But that's,
start using it, and I always use an example where if let's say game week 1 last season, Solanke got injured, and a classic question everyone is asking: should I go Watkins or should I go João Pedro? And of course, there's a price difference in the two, right? So I think people who are not used to analytical models look at it as a single decision of what if I pick João Pedro versus Ollie Watkins. I think when you start getting more analytical and you start putting these things down into a model and then understand your path, that will then help you understand that if you were to release 2 million to go for a João Pedro, now this year we won't release anything if you went Solanke to João Pedro, but if you were to release money, what does that mean for your future players, your moves, versus if you just went for an upgrade and you needed a million? So I think this pathing is something that people will get a lot more comfortable with the more they use the model. But I want to go to the next question, which is basically what's different. I mean, there's a lot of analytical models out there. Some are, made by just simple planners. Some are basically more complicated through massive data. Why is Solio different?
So I think it's kind of not to repeat myself, it's kind of some of the points I said already. I'll sort of put them back through, but it's dealing with this uncertainty of we don't know what's going to happen next. So actually planning for that uncertainty without having a fixed plan. This might go, I don't want to make it too complicated. Stochastic optimization is a term that we use quite a lot in terms of actually what's running under the hood on these like complicated optimization models. If you don't want to use that, you can kind of plan your own way. But essentially what it is it's rather than planning for the average case, you plan for the case that allows you to maximize plan A and plan B. So it might be that, okay, I need to be ready to get to Salah if it goes this way, or get ready to go to Haaland if it goes this way. So planning for a case where you have half of each of them doesn't really make sense. You might get to a point where you can't get to either because you try to get to one, or you end up aiming for one and it goes the other way and you're stuffed. But actually, if you can play quite well and go, okay, I can keep my options open another couple of weeks, it gives you a really good plan in that sense. I think also, it's a big shift from the usual approach. So it helps you build like robust teams, something that's a bit more like adaptable to the real things that happen. Because every time we run the model, every time people post clean sheet numbers, it's all like with the information we have right now. So actually, sometimes some projected data of like what the clean sheets are that go out on the Thursday, you get some information on the Friday in the press conferences, and suddenly it's different by that Friday. It's all very dynamic. So I think it's really giving you this dynamic ecosystem to play with. So there's going to be like live updates coming through from the markets. It's a market-based model, so I think it should be something people in the community are quite familiar with. A lot, like we've got Rob T involved, obviously. We've worked quite closely with him, so a lot of the data that he shares is not dissimilar to what we're using for our projections. Obviously, there aren't markets available for 3 or 4 weeks down the line, so we use market inferences. We kind of go, okay, like what are the markets thinking? How do we get that? But again, that's the default that we're providing you. So you have a starting point, so that you're not starting with all the teams are equally good, which is not very useful at all. You go, okay, well, directionally, this is about accurate. And then if you come in and say, I really think that Leeds are the best team in the Premier League, then you can play like that. You can play with that belief if you really wanted to. Most people, I'm sure, will do small tweaks, but it's really getting stuck in and being able to adjust any part of it and allow that to work all together. And so your beliefs are coherent. So if you think Salah's amazing and Wirtz is amazing and Diaz is amazing and Gakpo is amazing, then like, sure, that's great, but Liverpool's goals can't add up to 6. Well, it might in one game, but like as an essential expectation, that's not going to make sense. So it's like, okay, make sure you're not overcorrecting here. You might think that this attack's not very good and this defense isn't very good, but when they play each other, then are you saying that, which one's worse? Which one's actually going to come out? So they're either going to score or get a clean sheet. So your insights really matter. The tool works best when you add your own knowledge on top of it. So I think actually really giving power to the user is something that we really want to try and do a bit more differently, rather than these kind of slightly more static, here's some data, or here's a solution that you might want to use. And actually, once you start playing with it, you're more attached to it, and you're actually getting solutions that make sense for your belief system, rather than someone else is telling you to do something.
It's the community broadly has become more analytical without them realizing it, because with Rob T's numbers, I mean, pretty much every team selection video today has those numbers. And they're used to looking at it like expected goals per 90. They see Isak at 0.71, they see Salah at 0.65. People in their heads are already doing this where, oh, Salah's a midfielder, so even though the goals for Isak are higher, Salah should be higher expected points because he gets 5 points, he could get a clean sheet, and so okay, I'll captain Salah. What they're doing is basically building a model in their head. What hopefully they will get out of Solio is exactly that, but just essentially in expected points. So what does all of this mean in terms of what your beliefs are? And market odds is an important one, right? Because a lot of skepticism in models comes from people were way too high on Spurs game week 1 and had Poro for no reason, or various things. And maybe some of them are right, some of them are wrong, but at least here, like you mentioned, you can adjust your minutes, you can adjust your per 90 goals. If you don't think that Palmer should be 0.98, you can change your fixture difficulty. So I think that's really handy and that's helpful. I guess the last segment of this is what happens next. Like, people are listening to this and saying, okay, I want to see this stuff. When can they do that, and what happens next for us?
Yeah, so we're in the final stages of our last beta test right now. So I can't reveal too much on that, but we're kind of simulating the start of the season and getting people to play game weeks 1 to 8 with some simulations, and they're going crazy for it. I think it's quite funny. Like I keep seeing like James has run the sims, and this guy's Salah scored a hat trick, or Bowen scored a hat trick, I think, last night. And it's like,
and Watkins, I had Watkins.
Maybe he's a good pick, maybe. And it's like, well, this isn't reality. We've just, simulated it. Chris Rigg, I think, is on a bit of a tear right now for Sunderland, but it kind of it also highlights to a few people that these randomness things come out. So anyway, so we're running our final beta test, so that'll be finishing shortly, and then the aim is to launch in early August. So we don't have a set date yet, but we will be keeping people posted. If you want updates, you can follow us on our social media. I'll put the links in the description and stuff, but it's at Solio Analytics. There's also a newsletter on solioanalytics.com. There's going to be a free version and paid version. So I think we do want to offer, it's not all going to be behind a paywall. Obviously, some of it is going to be funding some of our time. I think actually like some of the tiers will be you're wanting to help the project rather than specifically paying for this access. So there will be a few premium features, but there will be a free projection model. It's going to be the same projection model. There'll just be a few features you can't use the same. We haven't figured it out exactly. But yeah, free and paid tiers. It's a web application, so there's no app on the phone, but you can access it on your mobile in your browser. And yeah, we're very excited to be launched. I can't believe it's.
One thing I love is I run a solve on my laptop, and then I go on my mobile, and then it just continues. Like, it's like
they're all linked. Yeah,
they're all linked. So
James
really
works
cool.
some magic. So, if you have them both up, actually, I don't know if you've tried this. You can make a change on your phone while your laptop's open, and your laptop just moves.
Nice.
I'm sure it'll work like that perfectly. Once we get launched, I won't overpromise and underdeliver. We'll try and do the opposite. But yeah, we're very excited. I can't believe. I remember having that meeting back in January 2024. Going like, should we give this a go? And then all of a sudden we've got podcast name, website. Yeah, here we are. Go time. Season starting.
I'm myself very excited to be part of it, and you guys are building something really special. I hope, let's not, like you said, not overpromise. Let's see how this goes. But yeah, coming to a inbox near you, basically. Is
only a couple of weeks away.
Yeah. Excellent. Let's go to FPL. Let's go to what are the changes in FPL. FPL is live. There's been a lot of changes. I mean, were you surprised how much they changed in the game?
Yeah, I think for a few seasons it got, I don't want to say stagnant, but there weren't that many wholesale changes. Obviously, a lot of the changes come from who are the players, who's in the teams, like things that aren't FPL related. Well, they're FPL related, but it's not FPL towers who are making these signings for the Premier League clubs. So obviously, it's a new landscape every year. Harry Kane leaves, and that's a big shift and what we have to do. But yeah, a lot more rules, a lot more things to follow, a lot more things to come out. I think we got quite used to them doing price reveals for about a week leading up to the launch, but actually it was the day, it was Sunday, and we'd had 4 or 5 rules, and the game was supposedly coming out on Monday, which it did, and we'd had, I don't know, 2 price reveals, 3, if that. We got
four.
4 on the Sunday, then we got 2 on the Monday morning. But it was double chips, new assist rule, bonus changes, defensive contributions. People are still kind of working out what to call those. I think people are writing DEFCON and CBIT and all these acronyms, and then I'm like, I can write them down, but then I've got to say this. What do I call it?
Say this out loud.
And then it's recoveries for the mids as well. So it's CBIT, CBIRT. I don't know. Quite a lot of change. AFCON transfers as well, AFCON and DEFCON. So all change. Yeah, I think having tried to play a few other formats and having had to go through a process sometimes at the start of the summer of like learning a new game completely from scratch, then it's not quite thrown me off. And actually, some of them are a bit similar to some of the. I remember last year when they brought in the 5 free transfers, I was like, this is different, but I have played a game where there's unlimited rolling, so it's how it interacts with the other rules. It's not like perfect, I play like this. But I think that's what makes it fun. I think like if it was just the same game every year, I think we would get bored of it. So
that's a positive way of looking at it. So speaking of making it fun, double chips, what are your thoughts?
More fun. What was it? More chips, more points, more fun. I think so we already had double wildcard. I think actually, I can't remember how long ago it was. We did only used to have one wildcard.
Then we got, I think 6-7 years ago, you have to play it in January only or something like that.
I can't remember. And there's a few games where it's like you don't have a wild card, you just have a period. Well, we had that at the World Cup, didn't we? There was like, it wasn't a wild card. It was, but it was like, it's being played for everyone now. But I mean, I suppose Premier League had stopped for a month. Or however long it was. Yeah, so I think the triple captain is one that like it actually I think hasn't come into play quite like it did last season for a while in terms of like a few really good single game week fixtures at the start. Especially with Haaland playing so well and taking so many chances for Man City, and actually the markets were rating him as really highly and playing the promoted teams really early on. And we knew that we were probably going to have fewer doubles last year, so it was actually maybe more of a reasonable gamble. We had a mystery chip that we didn't know what that was going to be. So actually, the case to play the triple captain early, no, we've got quite used to, okay, the chips are all better in doubles and blanks. I'll save them for when those happen. But last year we did have a decision about playing it in 2 or 9. A few people did, and people played it later. So I think it takes that decision out, which I think was a fun decision, actually, like last year. So we don't have that. But you don't really have to plan for a triple captain. It's
an episodic chip.
Yeah, it looks cool when your guy hits 30 points and you get 90 total, but like you would have presumably captained them already. You've got an extra captaincy on top. And in a single game week, they're probably going to get 10 to 15 is like a pretty good return.
Even that's high, I think.
Yeah,
10.
So like that's pretty, so once in the first half of the season, you're going to back the guy you were captaining anyway a bit harder. So that's more, it's interesting, but it's not like strategically going to be too different unless you're really trying to hit a triple captaincy that no one else owns. You want to like get, a good enough player that people aren't reaching, or maybe people are free hitting that week and then you're going to triple captain because people can't, and vice versa. And the bench boost as well, a bit more planning on the scale, I think. But a lot of people will probably play it in game week 1. It was kind of something a few people have played in game week 1 before anyway, because it's the only time where you can set up your team from scratch for a bench boost and kind of get like a free hit bench boost.
What are your thoughts on that?
Bench boost? But yeah, I feel like it's not a safe play, but it's unlikely. The things that could go wrong is that your players don't turn up unexpectedly, but you've kind of got that in mind when you're building the bench boost. And generally, there's not as many shocks in game week 1 as there are sometimes later on in the season, especially like festive Christmas period.
Correct.
But I wonder
random injuries over the week.
Yeah, and sometimes you get some odd ones anyway, and obviously people got burnt by Barco and Nkunku and Kwanzaa last season. But I wonder if you were playing a bench boost, you might not have picked them. And some people talk about, okay, like if I've got this deep squad in game week 1, then I'm going to have to wild card out of it, or use transfers to get out of it to get into this other squad. But the way I play is I often try and have that deep squad anyway. I think there's benefits to having a full 15 in terms of the way that you can rotate players around and, again, be more robust to different changes. If a guy gets injured, you can just stick them on the bench for a bit and decide what to do later, rather than, oh, I must transfer him out now because I don't have a bench. I need to decide now. Actually, deciding later has some value. But I think the only thing that's putting me that I would do differently in terms of starting last year is last year I started with a 4.5 and a 4.0 keeper from the same team. So obviously I think I probably wouldn't do that in case I decide to bench boost in 2 or 3 or 4 or something, were I not to start in big bench boost 1. But I think otherwise, as long as you've got 2 keepers and you've got playing 4th and 5th defenders and are playing reasonably good 8th attacker, then you can probably just play the bench boost at some point in the first half without having too much play, especially if we get 5 free transfers in game week 16. Like, you can suddenly set it up in 16, or you can be a bit more aggressive with your transfers in 10 to 15 and play it somewhere in there, because you're going to get topped up to 5 once you get to 16 anyway. So I think there's quite a few spaces to use it. I might save it just in case, but I haven't really thought too much about it. What do you think you'll play it first?
I mean, I'm inclined to play it in the
Yeah.
first 3 weeks. I mean, I'll see depending on rotation if 1, 2, or 3 works better. But my inclination is that yes, you can do this aggressive, play it in 14 or 15, use all your transfers because you have to do it anyway. But at the same time, it's also in the middle of Europe. Like, you're getting closer to Christmas period. There'll be mid-game weeks. Like, you just don't know. And the longer you leave the wild card, the longer you leave problems, because with the deep bench, what you're saying is, if one of them turns out to be a Barco, then I just leave him. Like, I don't need to worry about him. So unless you wild card. So I feel just getting the bench boost out and not letting it hang basically has some upside. Maybe it is the safer play, but I also see downsides if you just leave it and then you are in this position where now I need to spend these transfers in 16 or 17 that have been gifted to me to just basically spread the Salah money, and then I have to somehow get it back because I need to bring Salah back at some point. It's just so many transfers you're using up, especially at a time when you know that in game week 24, 25, they could be doubles. From last year, we know there's a precedent that there are doubles in those weeks because they are the qualifying weeks. Now, we don't know if it's 24, 25 this year, but some of those weeks that are coming up will have such doubles or could have such doubles. So I'm just inclined to say, what, get it done, get it over with in the first 2-3 weeks, because that has the highest visibility. It has no or very few midweek games. I know the Carabao Cup second round happens as well in, I think, between game week 2 and 3. So just get it over with is my view.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty safe play from the sense that there's less to go wrong. So from an absolute risk point of view of like what could happen to my own team, I think holding it a bit later, you run the risk of something maybe going wrong. But maybe that's why it's exciting me, because I might be able to play a bench boost in a different week to other people, and that's just a bit more fun, and you get your own kind of paths and different things. But I think ultimately what's probably going to happen is something similar to what happened with the triple captain last year, which was that you didn't really gain much or lose much by saving it or playing it early. I suppose the guys who played in game week 2 got a lot more points than the guys who played it in 32, 33, but the bench boosts are probably going to be fairly similar. Like, the swing's not going to be massive unless it's like
These are single game week benches anyway.
Yeah, like it's ultimately going to come down to, like, did your keeper get lucky and you got clean sheets on both of them? Did all your guys play? Did your captain hit? This, that, and the other. So it's probably not going to have. Exactly. My pessimistic view is probably not going to have a huge impact. I think the most interesting one is the free hit. Because that requires some planning. That affects strategy a lot more. I think the bench boost is more just, I'll have a good bench at some point. I'll obviously have a good captain at some point for triple captain. But the free hit is, especially with the rules from last year where you can roll through them, So maybe you have a guy who's suspended for 1 week. You can free hit, not have to transfer him out, and then have him back when he's back from suspension. I know we did quite a bit of like when the budget's really tight at the start of the season, you end up kind of trying to flip the premiums around a bit. So you flip between Haaland and Salah, or you make some compromises to have both. Same with Palmer and Saka and maybe Bruno Fernandes and these kind of guys. I'm going to call him a premium now that he's getting tackles and interceptions and stuff.
9
he's
million.
9 million. Isak maybe was a better example, 10.5. You can't have all of these guys all at the same time. So if there's like a specific week where I think was it Arsenal play Liverpool in game week 3, or is it Arsenal City? I've forgotten exactly.
Game week 3.
Yeah, free hit 3.
No, it's Arsenal Liverpool.
Arsenal Liverpool. Yeah, sorry. Free hit 3 is something that's been floated already by a few people, I think. In that actually the Arsenal Liverpool guys are quite good around that. You can free hit into Haaland. You can build a Salah draft and free hit to Haaland basically. Which is I know a few people did free hit 9 last year. It was quite popular among some of my friends. I think it was a bit less popular overall, but there was a lot to be gained in playing it in a single game week at that point. So it kind of I've forgotten who City were playing. It was one of the promoted teams, probably Southampton.
Home to Southampton. I triple captain
week. Yeah. So actually, if you had a nice robust team for the start of the season with Salah, and you were able to roll some transfers, then rather than using your transfers to get to Haaland to go back to Salah, or using your wild card to do one of the switches, then you could play your free hit, keep 4 or 5 transfers and roll through, and then wild card in game week 19, which a few people did. So I think when the big guys play each other, if one of the other big teams is playing an easy game, which looks like game week 3 is a candidate for that already, then there's a way to kind of play around that. If you need to structurally change to get a good team, you can play your free hit. So you can set up otherwise, rather than starting with Haaland and trying to have Haaland ready for 3 or vice versa, or covering, so to speak, with a Marmoush or someone, or even just captaining a different team. But I haven't looked in too much detail, but I think that's the one that's going to be interesting. And I hope that there's several places to play the free hit. I think if it kind of
I think there's more.
Comes out as I don't know. You can save it for a rainy day as well. That's also like
you could save it for later, right?
It can also be used a bit more defensively. Like you can play a free hit in a blank game week. People used to do. You can't really bench boost in well, I suppose you could, but quite tricky. So you can go like I'll save it for something going wrong and it's a sticking plaster, rather than I need to maximize it. So you can play both with the free hit. Maybe helps.
So I like game week 6 a lot for the reason that you mentioned. Because I mean, if you're going for a Salah only setup, right? Salah, not Haaland. I think Haaland is the better captain in terms of delta between 3 and, in game week 3, yes, Haaland, you can go for a switch where Salah is playing Arsenal, but then Salah is also away to Crystal Palace in game week 6, where Haaland is home to Burnley. So basically, there's a fixture. Okay, in Salah's case, is not as low, or there's not enough of a bad fixture, but at least on Haaland's side, that compensates it. And I think the other thing is Arsenal play Newcastle, so Newcastle away. So similar, you don't have to play Arsenal defenders. I'm even thinking like a cheeky, you can go for an Isak instead of a Palmer to start with, and then that's the week you don't have to have an Isak because he plays Arsenal, and then you can load up on Man City, you can load up on Chelsea. So that was one that came to my mind. Of course, what analytics helps you do is basically map all of this out in terms of expected points and see which one is better. But in absence of that, I think 3 and 6 are also the ones that jumped out to me. Or you go a little bit later, right? I mean, like you said, you just leave it for a blank game week. Maybe there's a weather postponement or something like that. All of that is viable. But that I do like the fact that there's something different. And I think people, when they play the free hit, they'll have to also think about how it pairs with the wild card, right? I mean, you in the olden times, you could have basically said, you know what, game week 6, I'm going to sell Salah, I'm going to get Haaland, and I'm going to get Haaland for home to Burnley, and then I'm going to wildcard in game week 7 and then get Haaland back and do all of that stuff. Now you can just free hit, and so that can also delay your wildcard, or vice versa. You can play a wildcard earlier and save your free hit for later. So I think that pairing also is something that I guess people will try to optimize.
Yeah. So I think basically the rule of thumb is it's going to be some kind of premium structure switch. I'm sure you could use it elsewhere if you really wanted to go, I really think this team is someone I want to load up on for this fixture. I want to get onto Triple Palace against someone that I don't want otherwise. But I think that's more of a secondary thing that you'll do once you've decided to play the free hit for premium structuring purposes. But then once we get later in the season, you start to be able to build a bit of budget, and there's a more obvious who's the cheap mid that allows me to do this rather than being a bit sure and playing some of the slightly more nailed or more reliable sort of mid-priced, lower-priced options. Then you can go, okay, I do have Holland and Salah. I don't need to move it around for the captaincy. But
exactly.
I'm intrigued to see how it plays out.
Yeah, we alluded to the AFCON free transfers. Now, don't tell me this has any strategic advantage. I mean, for me, this was a little bit unnecessary, and I think that's the general consensus. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think it was the one that surprised me the most and took me the longest to kind of work out why they'd done it. Until you kind of digged back further into like, okay, well, Salah's not here for 5 weeks, and I'm sure last AFCON their engagement numbers will have dropped quite a bit, and it's to get people to come back for that, rather than we looked last time and most people had 5 or 6 African players and they all went to, like, I don't think people tend to have loads of them. They posted a list of, no disrespect to the African players, I think a lot of them are very good, but like it was unlikely that I was going to have 4 or 5 of them, and if I did, then I'd start coming off them in week 10. Yeah, exactly. So that's what we used to. So I think it's more that it's to re-engage people around that period when they can't own Salah, who's sort of the pride and joy of the Premier League, and I know FPL is really big in Egypt, for basically because Salah's here. So, and I think on the face of it, it felt a bit excessive as well. Like, just here's 5 free transfers, but also you would have had one anyway, so it's only 4 more. And if we used to get 34 across the season in terms of 2 wild cards and a free hit, and obviously you don't get one in game week 1. You can buy more for hits. We've lost one now because we got an extra free hit, so there's 33, but then we get an extra 4. So on the grand scheme, you get them all at once, which is a bit odd. But in the grand scheme of how many extra transfers I'm using across the season, it's not a huge difference. It's just there's going to be a period around 10 to 20. I don't know exactly which, but you use it. But that your play style is probably going to have to change slightly. You can value a transfer much lower leading up to, well, I know I'm up at 5. I think, especially last season, not a lot of people got to 5. I know some people who didn't even get past 2. They basically played, well, I don't know if they deliberately did it or inadvertently, but basically didn't play with the new rules. They're like, no, I've got 2. I'm going to use one. So it's an unusual spot for people. I think most people didn't get to 5, and it's back to that idea of like, oh, if I don't use one, I'm going to burn one, which is what we used to have when you only had 2, and you go, okay, well, I need to make this decision. So it's going to put us in, but it's also jumping from, okay, my free transfer value is really low. I should just use them all in 15. Like, I might as well use one because it's use it or lose it. To suddenly, all right, I've got 5 now and I need to use 1, but I'm going to try and hold. Can I hold them round to that mid game week 20s period and sort of play as if I have 1 or 2, but actually I've got 3 or 4 in reserve and just use them later? Or am I going to go, there's stuff to attack game week 15 to 20 and use them then, and then build back up again like I used to? Or I don't know. I haven't really thought about how it's going to happen. I think it's going to depend on how my team's set at that point, and there'll be other things happening. Yeah. And sometimes some of the players don't go. I remember I got burnt a little bit a few seasons ago when Emmanuel Dennis just didn't go, and I bought Josh King, and I think it eventually ended up in a Dennis red card in a double game week. But it's all a bit.
I was Josh King as well.
We don't know what's going to happen around then. Like, I mean, say Haaland's injured at that period. Like, do we need the transfers? I might just have everyone I need. I might have Palmer and Salah, Palmer and Isak and Saka, and I don't need to move stuff around, and I'm swapping backup goalkeepers, or I don't know. Probably the one that I thought seemed a bit odd, but I think it's just gonna mean people can play aggressive for that period, and actually you play maybe a bit less aggressive at the start, and you can tune it up then. So people who can be flexible and switch between playstyles should maybe benefit. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, look, we'll play what we are given, right? And I think people will adapt to this thing. And it's only for this year, right? I mean, we won't have this again next year. But I think one very interesting thing, which is not obviously what FPL have done, that's just how the fixtures fall. Actually, between Game Week 12 and beyond, both Salah and Haaland have great fixtures. So actually, you can be a little bit aggressive, maybe through wildcard or something else, try to squeeze both of them in, then use all of these transfers to actually then start to spread the money later when you get it. So there are strategies that people will maybe deploy, but I think all of them go into what you're saying is you can be aggressive between game week 10 to 15, let's say, and then after 16 you can maybe be a little bit more, okay, I'm going to keep these five, this bank of five now for the long term, maybe even the doubles and the blank even up to 29, and say I'm going to stay at 3 to 5, 3 to 5, 3 to 5, because that's when I'll really get the pressure of transfers. I remember you had this analytics 64 chart of when transfers are used. There's always pockets before doubles, before blanks,
exactly.
or maybe there's a major fixture swing that people just tend to use 2 or 3 or 3 or 4. So you just keep it.
Yeah, as long as you're not actually pushing that, I'm on 5, I need to do something, then you can play as if you've got 2 and just pretend that they're ones that you're not getting until game week 23 or 4.
Exactly.
Whenever we get this kind of info. And I think by the time we get to there, we'll have an idea of people have started to work out where these things are going to happen, and maybe we've worked out whether there's been a game that's postponed for the weather, or which kind of teams are going to have the clusters and clashes, and not where the double game weeks are going to go specifically, but like which teams might be prone to having to need one brought forward, and depending on who's far in the League Cup and that kind of thing. The only other one was the bonus point. Well, not the only other one. We've got bonus points. There's assists and clearances to get back onto, but the bonus tweaks. I still not sure I understand the bonus point system. I can read the rules, but I don't remember them. I think, imagine they brought out the bonus system as it is now as a new rule. People are going like, why have I got 5 free transfers for AFCON? Imagine if you said, yeah, we're bringing out this thing where goals get their own bonus fantasy game, and then some of them get 3, and if it's a shot, then that's +2, but then you're playing another fantasy game to get another fantasy points. Bonus, BPS. It's very confusing, but there's been a few tweaks. I did write them down so I could remember.
Yeah, I think the penalty one being nerfed a bit, I think to me makes sense.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, in some ways, it's easier to score a penalty than an open play goal. You can argue, but they get the same points. And to score a penalty is the same for a defender or a forward or a midfielder. So it shouldn't basically give you, it already gives you that point difference. So I think basically bringing that down, and the idea of João Pedro coming on the 75th minute, getting a penalty and then getting a 8-pointer because of that
suddenly hits the bonus,
is not really, So I think that's a good change. They've basically tried to balance it out. Penalties are still overpowered in the game. So picking a penalty, all things being equal, if a guy's on penalties and versus not, you'll always pick the penalty taker regardless of this change. But I think it goes in the right direction. The keeper save inside the box also, I don't mind it, because ultimately valuing the Flecken saves or the old Raya saves or the old Pope saves, basically from the years gone by, just getting pop shots from outside the box. They're different from the Pickford saves of basically making these worldy saves on, inside the box. So I think giving them a little bit more benefit for saves inside the box is basically good.
The keepers also took a bit of a hit last year with the defenders as well, in terms of the -2 bonus. Was it -2 BPS for every goal they conceded?
Every goal conceded,
So guys like Pedro Porro, who used to be able to get some bonus by being really attacking, getting an assist in a 2-all, but because he's creating loads of chances and lots of tackles and dribbles and stuff, then he could get the bonus. Suddenly he was not able to do that. And the keepers did see that to an extent as well. So I think giving them 3 points for a save inside the box instead of 2 is a nice one to remedy that. The pen save for them has gone down from 9 to 8. I don't know if that's really going to have any material. I don't know. I don't know what made them think that 9 was too high and 8 was the right number. But then the other one's the tackle. We're going to get onto tackles. And all
I know why that changes, by the way.
Yeah, go on.
the pen save, they've just basically equalized it. So because it was also a save inside the box, that went up one.
Oh, of
So they've taken
course.
this
Yeah,
one
yeah, yeah.
down one.
Yeah,
So
they've
that's the
undone
state.
that. Yeah, that makes
So there's
sense.
no net change.
Right, I see. Yeah, so pen save is same as it was before. It's just penalties are in the box.
Yeah.
Yes, and then tackles. It used to be net tackles was +2. So the tackles you won minus the tackles you lost. So I think I've got the definitions right here, but basically a tackle is when you take possession off the guy who has the ball. A tackle won is when your team then has possession, and a tackle lost is when the other team gets the possession back. So if you know, Saka's dribbling down the wing and Lewis Hall takes the ball off him, if it goes to Fabian Schär, then that's a tackle won. If it goes to Declan Rice, it's a tackle lost. So tackles is both of those. And it used to be that it was tackles won minus tackles lost for net tackles, which is not a stat I've seen almost anywhere. But now it's just tackles won gets 2 bonus. So you take off the tackles lost. So it's
right.
I think the fullbacks do tend to benefit a fair bit from this, because they don't benefit as much from the defensive contributions relatively. But anyone who used to be making some tackles but also would be attacking and getting tackled themselves now doesn't get punished for getting tackled. That's the word tackle over and over and over again. But it's a small change. I think the fullbacks are the ones who benefit slightly.
I think ultimately,
again,
big picture, the game has basically last year went overboard with nerfing the defenders, and they've brought them up a little bit. There's also the goal clearances BPS that has gone up.
Of course.
So they've basically rebalanced it a little bit.
Yeah.
And through other things like the CBITs and stuff, which we're about to get into, I think they've rebalanced the game a little bit, which makes sense. So overall, I think not a huge thing. Assist rule, before we get into the CBIT stuff, I think also good, right? I mean, good for clarity, but you had a really nice chart that you prepared. So talk us through it.
So I think Baker was talking on above average FPL that he went and counted all the tweets that said none. And I was sort of laughing because that's definitely what I would have done, but I realized I had a data set with this in it. Because I'd looked at this before based on actually like because you get Opta assists, which is the definition of what people get as an assist. So when fantasy assists don't match up on the fantasy Premier League site to the Premier League site, because you also get assists for being fouled and someone takes a penalty and scores it, or you shoot and there's a rebound and that kind of thing, which aren't Opta assists. They're not assists that are rewarded and shown on Match of the Day, but they're assists that you get fantasy points for them. Right. So last season there was 1,115 goals. I think I've forgotten. I wrote it down somewhere. About 30 of them were own goals. Not super relevant, but I had the data. And there were 804 Opta assists. So that's 72% of the total goals had an Opta assist. 978, so 87.7%, had a fantasy assist by the old definition. And FPL said that 41 more goals got an assist under the new rules. So that's 1,019. Or 91.4%. So it's a 3.7% increase. So essentially, there was 137 goals out of over 1,000 last year that had no assist, no fantasy assist, no Opta assist. And about a third of them, so 30%, 40, one a week, will now get an assist under the new rule set. So it's not a huge change. I think it's just the ones that were a bit more contentious are going to fall in favour of there is an assist. But I think one assist a week, given that there's over 1,000 goals across the season, it's not a really huge difference. I think it is going to slightly proportionally benefit attackers. So obviously attackers get more assists anyway, but I think they're going to benefit from these awarded assists even more so than the defenders, because it's ones where there's guys crossing it into the box and it gets headed away from the intended target, and that's
still
the guy who gets it scores. That's now an assist. So the guys who are taking these lots of shots, lots of crosses, lots of dribbling into the box, lots of this kind of thing, those are the guys who are going to get these extra ones. But again, pretty small change. I think it was mainly to solve people. There was a lot of contentious decisions in the last few seasons. People
It's
arguing
to
about them.
stop the whining. That's all.
Yeah, I think optimistically it's to stop the whining, or pessimistically it's to move the line at which people are whining at.
Yes,
But
exactly.
I'm sure it'll be the former. Yeah, I think it'll be a lot better. I
The
think
player whose shot was just inside the box or outside the box. We'll still cry about
yeah,
that.
it's yeah. So I try not to think too much about them anyway. There's actually different the different fantasy games I play have different definitions for assists. So I know that this is an assist in this game, and actually I don't even know. I just hope for the
You've
best.
just learned to
I just be
accept it.
like,
Just give me
they'll
my
give it or they
points.
won't, and I don't, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's still fun. I still like watching people grumble about it. And
Right.
I'm still aggrieved of that Edison. The goalkeeper assists are the most fun when they launch it
Yes.
forward, and it wasn't given, and I had Edison. Edison's been a darling of analytics and probably fetishized in some ways because he's just ones that people didn't want to own, too expensive, don't like him, doesn't get bonus, doesn't get saves, but good player.
How does this work? You've raised
Yeah.
a good question. So Edison hoofs the ball up,
Yes.
or Pickford. Let's use Pickford. Edison may
Mhm.
not be in the league, and not in the box, but outside the box. Basically, a defender heads it out, right?
Mhm.
But it lands to Beto. Beto then takes the ball from outside the box to inside the box, shoots and scores. Is that an
I
assist?
think it is, yeah, but
It's an assist.
I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. It should be, yeah, because I think it's to do with how many defenders it's hit as well. If it hits one,
Yeah, so it
yeah.
has to be one.
Yeah, so if it hits
If it
two
hits two,
defenders,
then
then it
yeah.
doesn't matter. Yeah, you've lost it. But yeah, it would have to hit a player. I can't remember what, because before it was like, did he mean to hit it to Beto?
That's what I mean.
Like,
But
well,
now it
how do
doesn't
you
matter.
know? So
That's
yeah,
it doesn't
I think
matter.
it's just this an assist. If he's,
Yeah.
it's kind of this. It's almost last touch, like the guy who hit it last before that. But yeah, it was a bit amusing to see. We've simplified the assists, so then here's a 2-minute video and an essay. But I'm not sure I quite understood them before. So yeah, the difference is not going to be huge. I wouldn't suddenly think, oh, the guys who are getting assists, I should mentally bump up a huge amount. It's only a small change, but hopefully one for the better.
Exactly.
But we'll find out.
All right. So I think the one that will have the biggest change, we think, in terms of points and on a daily basis, actually changing our lives, is basically seeing all these 2-pointers crop up in random teams with random players. So talk us through this table. It's a really good table that you've prepared on the change and what the table says.
Yes, I think maybe slightly too many colors, but it's enough data, and I'll keep it up so people who are watching on YouTube can see it, and if you're listening, then I'll try and give you enough of an idea of what it's showing. But essentially, this is the defenders first, so we'll look at defenders and mids. I think the only forward who would have got some defensive contributions last season was Bowen, who obviously wasn't a forward, but no other forward actually got enough. They didn't hit the threshold, so I can include them, but they all got none. They don't touch the ball enough that this isn't for them. Maybe if someone's suddenly playing out of position, but basically I've taken all the defenders who played. I put the limit at 20 games, which maybe was a bit high, but it was basically the guys that we know who play most of the time. Maybe they missed a few for an injury. This, that, and the other, but rather than players who only played a handful of games, or I think there was a couple who played like one match and hit it. Not super useful to know for that one, but I've got the clearances, blocks, and interceptions and tackles. They're like base rate for each one and as a total. So the threshold that they need to hit here is 10. So we can see that some of them actually have, on average, are hitting more than 10. Tarkowski's at 10.96 equals for last year, so that's per 90 minutes. And then I've also got a column for the percentage of matches they started where they hit this threshold of 10. So the top guys are actually hitting it pretty much every other game. Tarkowski actually hit it in 2/3 of his starts, so 33 starts, hit it 22 times. And then what I've also done is I've highlighted, maybe too many rows, I've highlighted some rows in orange, which are players who played for teams who also kept more than 10 clean sheets. So I think there was 9 teams kept 10 or more clean sheets, which is a threshold of 25% clean sheet rate. Right. So essentially what I've done there is I think what we're looking for is double threats here. I don't think Jan Bednarek was one of the guys who got most of the defensive contribution points last season behind Tarkowski and a few others. But he played for Southampton, who kept, well, not many clean sheets. I know they got one against Man City right at the end, but it was only a handful. So while he's getting an extra 40 odd points for defensive contributions, his other points just aren't good enough to really put him into consideration. Whereas someone like Tarkowski, who plays for a defensive Everton team, who kept a fair amount of clean sheets, then this makes him a much better asset. So actually it starts to put him in consideration with some of the guys, maybe not quite up to the level of like an Arsenal defender. I know Gabriel and Saliba aren't on this. Well, they're further down the table. Gabriel only hit it a couple of times. I think Saliba hit it a few more. But their clean sheet rates are very high for Arsenal, whereas Everton's is not as high. It's still good for a mid-table team. Or it's a sort of a middle of the pack defense. So it's strong enough. But if we think about these players at the top, Tarkowski, Branthwaite, Murillo, Lacroix, who are hitting this bonus threshold every other game, then it's 2 points for that threshold. So it's 2 or bust. You hit 2 or you don't. And that's half as many points as a clean sheet is worth. So half of it's like 25% bonus in clean sheet, right?
Yeah.
It is 50% of CBIT, 25% of clean sheet is sort of roughly equivalent. So if you think to some of the tables that we kind of get used to, like, okay, Arsenal's clean sheet rates are going to be 45 to 55 for a good game, that kind of level, and anything over 25 to 35 is a pretty good fixture for an average team. So if Everton have a clean sheet rate of 20 to 25 to 30%, then actually Tarkowski getting these CBIT points is now going to be as if they had a clean sheet rate of 50%. You can kind of mentally adjust that way. I don't know if that's a helpful analogy, but it kind of helped me understand
You're
it.
basically adding expected CBIT to your expected clean sheet
and
to basically get your points.
Ultimately, for people who use projection models, it just all comes out in, you put them all in the same unit, which is projected points. But to kind of help with the comparison for people who aren't as familiar, then that's kind of how much extra clean sheet. It turns an Everton defender into an Arsenal defender almost for a good game by getting these points. Obviously, Saliba can still get them, and you can see Virgil van Dijk is actually still quite high here. He got 30% of the time he got them. So there's a chunk of them who are getting it about every other game. There's another big chunk who are getting it sort of maybe 1 every 3 games, and then there's a few further down who are getting it 1 every 4. I think maybe Fulham and Bournemouth are maybe slightly hard done by to not have been highlighted here. I think they were actually quite strong defences who were a bit unfortunate not to get as many clean sheets. Maybe Forest the other way, their defence is good, but maybe it wasn't as good as it performed last year. So we probably shouldn't expect these guys to be getting all those bonus points or the same amount. Clean sheet points.
I think one thing that stands up is that FPL have priced up, basically from what you've said.
Yeah.
They've priced up the Forest and Everton defenders to reflect the fact that they've caught up with the Gabriels and Salibas a little bit, like not fully. And so therefore their pricing is 5.5 compared to those guys at 6. Now, there are, of course, other areas where, a 4.5 defender can outperform because of, maybe just beating their clean sheet odds or just having a good season, like Forest arguably did last year. So there are gems to be had at the 4.5 level, maybe even the 5 level, mainly in centre backs, because I'm seeing mostly centre backs here. There's not a lot of wingers, like maybe Williams, maybe Robinson. I think those are the two that stand out as fullbacks. But other than that, this is basically a centre back buff.
Yeah.
And so the key here will be to find those 4.5s or 5 million guys who haven't been picked up by the game as these monsters for these games, or getting these 2-pointers consistently. So that's what it is. Like, if I look at your chart and if I look at 4.5 million defenders who are highlighted in orange, I think Richards stands out. Anderson, so you said Fulham is hard done by, so Anderson, you can argue, could be interesting, 4.5. You have, who else do you have? You have Gahey. He could even move to Liverpool. Now, that would obviously bring down his CBIT numbers, but obviously bring up his clean sheet numbers. So
Well, it depends what it does to his minutes as well, I suppose.
Yeah,
But I'm sure he would
exactly.
play. But yeah, I think you can kind of see why. I think when I opened the game, I was like, why is Lacroix 5.0 and Gahey's 4.5? But actually, when you look at, they must have looked at something similar like this, and you can see why he's actually getting, 30% more of the games he's getting these defensive contributions in. Yeah, and actually, I think like part of it is going to be finding the team who almost do a Forest or are being undervalued as a defense. I think actually like a lot of them are rated quite similarly at the moment, but ones will emerge, ones will get new signings, teams will start to gel at the start and actually be quite solid, but suddenly, I think Brentford were like an okay defense, but suddenly like they've got a whole new change. They're losing Mbebo and maybe Visser. I know that's a forward, but the team's changing. That team strength's going to change. So it's not quite sure. We might find out that West Ham are quite solid or something like that, or Bournemouth are very solid. Everton start leaking a few more goals. They're not quite as solid as they were before, so it's going to be a bit adaptable. But I think another thing to note here is that none of the promoted teams are listed here. This is just the Premier League ones. So I think maybe a team like Leeds, who actually have got quite a few 4.0 centre backs, who will be maybe quite high on the defensive contributions. If their defense is actually looking okay, or Burnley, I think Burnley might stylistically not suit hitting as many defensive contributions for their players as the team strength might suggest. I think actually one of the things to note is that the defensive contributions is probably more stylistic than the team strength. Raw team strength was not a super accurate predictor of these clearances, blocks, interceptions and tackles. There's a trend, obviously. The better defenses aren't needing to make as many tackles; they've got more of the ball. But stylistically, you'll see there are some weaker defenses who don't hit the tackles in the same way or the clearances in the same way. So
I
I
wonder
feel like
how you will
Burnley
project
might
it.
go into that.
I wonder then how we'll project it. If there's not a perfect correlation between
Yeah.
good defense, bad CBIT, and bad defense, good CBIT, how would you predict these points? Is it just, okay, I just know that Everton and Forest are play in that way? I guess what I'm trying to say is, what is that way that creates it? And how will we be able to project it? I guess we need to work it out, right? We need to find that
Yeah,
correlation.
I mean, it's the rules have only just come out,
Yeah.
but there are definitely other metrics that will correlate with it more. So I think if you have less of the ball, then you're more likely to be tackling the other team. So you can look at things like opposition possession numbers. You can look at field tilt, how much of the ball is actually in the final third versus like are they pressing high or are they sitting in a low block? If you're in a low block, you're more likely to be hitting these clearances. So I think there are other metrics that we can use. I don't know which ones we'll be looking at specifically, but there are ways that we'll be able to project this by. Well, I guess that's kind of where football knowledge comes in as well. Like if you can kind of pick apart, I think these teams play like this, and you can spot it from watching the games, but actually then finding, okay, maybe there is a statistic we can find or a metric we can find that is an accurate predictor, and does that make sense as an accurate predictor? Is it I think what is it? There's one that's often the team's wages is a pretty good accurate predictor of the team's strength, which is useful to know, but it doesn't help you go, oh well, we should spend more money then. Like it doesn't just make the team better.
Yeah.
So it's
And Man
useful.
United
There's
obviously are the outlier.
there's Goodhart's law and stuff coming in like that, but I'm sure we'll find some stuff. Yeah, we'll do some digging, but it's not an inaccurate predictor, and we can look at a player level as well and sort of position level. So as you see, like it favors the centre backs a lot more than the wing backs or the full backs. But there are quite a few double threats in the defence. So there's quite a few players from Forest and Palace and teams like that. Even Virgil van Dijk does quite well for Liverpool, or Dan Burn for Newcastle. Man United maybe if they can shore things up as well. I'm going to flick us over to midfielders, where you can see that there's not quite as many double threats in the same way. So the guys who are hitting these tackles, clearances, it's more the recoveries. I think usually here. I think the defenders, most of the defensive contribution comes from clearances, and for the midfielders, most of it comes from recovery. So I've got the same table for mids here, and the only highlighted ones in the top 30 odd are Alexis McAllister, Bruno Fernandes, Declan Rice, and Yuri Tielemans. Casemiro does actually do really well on here, but he's I think he had 15 or 16 starts, so I didn't include him. But he would be actually be right at the top. I think he hit it like 60 something percent of the time. But his minutes are probably going to continue to be. He's not going to suddenly play 30 plus games next season. Maybe there's a period where he's, likely to play a lot of them. But I think Anderson as well for Forest is one I would highlight here, who's only 5.5, but is hitting this defensive contribution threshold 55% of the time last year. He's not highlighted, but his assist and his goal involvement rate. The goal involvement I've done here was 0.25, so quarter goal involvement per game. Anderson was about 0.2, so he's only a little bit short, but he's because he's getting these defensive contributions 55% of the time, whereas the other ones highlighted at 35%. His attacking output doesn't have to be great, and he's amongst the guys, Caicedo, Jefferson Lerma, Bentancur, Tyler Adams, Idrissa Gana. These guys aren't really goal threats in either sense. I can't actually remember which Gomez that is that I've put Wolves down. There's too many for them.
They have like name. 3 of them.
Yeah, I think it's Joao Gomez, but they're not really big assistants. Norgard's gone to Arsenal; he's not going to be playing as much. So Anderson is the one that stands out there. A bit further down, there are a few players actually who I think like a Bruno Guimaraes or a Damsgaard are actually like kind of just off the bottom of this table. Whose goal and assist rates are quite high as well. They probably stand out. But yeah, I think again it's unlikely that, especially if Caicedo was 4.5 instead of 5.5, you go, okay, right, that's some good value there because he's hitting this. Sure, he's not going to score very often, but he got 38 starts, and he's hitting this bonus every other game, and he might get a goal every now and then. He's probably perfect for a bench boost. But at 5.5, I think you're better off looking slightly higher for a Rice or a McAllister or a Tielemans or a Bruno Guimaraes for this kind of like double threat. And obviously there are good options who don't hit this defensive contribution for 6.5, whose goal and assist threat is high enough that they don't need defensive contributions to be an option. But I think it's not going to suddenly make Tyler Adams a great pick. It's going to make him a better pick than some of the other 5.0s who don't get minutes. So actually, like, there are more players playing lots of games who, I suppose, he only played 21. But Idrissa Gana Gueye, as an example, guys who are playing all these games are probably going to be slightly more useful as 8th attackers because they do have this kind of raised floor of every other game they're going to get some defensive contribution points.
Right.
So that maybe that makes bench boost earlier a bit easier to tie it all the way back because you can go, okay, well, there are some 5 to 5.5s who have some threat and are okay, rather than, I can't remember who we all Harry Winks, I think, was the 4.5 of choice last year. Didn't, there's only a couple of them who had any minutes, whereas actually for 5, you can go, oh, well, he's going to play and he's got a 50-50 chance of hitting this tackling threshold.
I mean, the issue I have with picking a player in this top half of this, so without the yellow bar, so let's take Anderson, right, is basically what you're buying. So you will never end up with a Morgan Rogers who basically is 5.5 last year but should have been 7 because FPL just underpriced him because they didn't know about him or they didn't know about his role or didn't know about his minutes. Maybe nobody did, but you went there thinking, okay, he has some potential, but it could turn out to be much bigger upside than the 5.5 I'm paying. In the case of Caicedo, Anderson, Lerma, Bentancur, they will be 5.5 next year. They will be 5.5 the year after, unless their role changes. What we know of them is they are basically 3-point players, 3-point average per game or 4-point at best, which is okay. I mean, it's not the end of the world if that's what they are. But that's where I feel maybe people will just say, you know what, I'm going to spend a little bit more and go for a guy who could turn out to be something completely more. Now, I'm not saying that's what the models will say, but I just feel the average manager will say, you know what, I'm just going to go for someone else with some attacking potential that maybe bridges this gap between the CBIT hitting and the expected output.
Yeah, I think that's it's people talk about the sort of distribution of potential points that a player might hit, and people being an explosive player, and actually like it tends to just kind of correlate with like the players who score more goals are the more explosive ones. I don't think actually it changes a huge amount. Maybe it feels like this guy scores hat tricks and blanks, but probably just a bit of luck of the draw. Whereas I think this is the first scoring mechanic in FPL that's used this threshold feature, which is a very much like it's quite popular in other games. They use it quite a lot in Sky Fantasy Football. Was basically a threshold game for passes, tackles, shots on target. So it's 2 or none. Like if he hits 40 recoveries, he's still only got 2 points. Doesn't matter. But obviously, if you score 1 goal, you get 4 points for a forward. If you score 10 goals, you 40 points. No one scores 10, but like it scales. The more you go, the higher you get. Whereas this is like it's 2 points or nothing, and you're not going to hit any more than that. So I think it does change the distribution of the kind of points that we're expecting, as you say. So like, yeah, Anderson's not going to suddenly be worth 9 million. Well, I mean, unless he's playing up front or gets penalties or something like that, but nothing to do with this tackling stuff is going to make him suddenly really good. But it does offer a bit more value to this price position because generally the points are boosted very slightly. So I think maybe it slightly counterbalances the fact that we can probably play a bit more aggressive in the start of the season with extra chips and this period where we have more transfers. I think some of the times where I think people are being too aggressive is when they've got a good bench player who they decide, oh no, I want to swap this guy out on my team to not play the bench player. And now those bench players, so if your bench guy was Anderson, are better. So you're more likely to go, okay, I don't need to. I can just bring this guy on because he might hit some tackles and I might get a 3 or a 4 rather than, oh, you'll probably get 2. But equally, we've got more need to use a transfer now. So it kind of, I'm not quite sure which of those push-pull forces is going to win out, and maybe that's something that will battle all the way through the season. But I do quite like that it's brought a few more players in. And I think these are actually guys that I quite like from my multi-format stuff. I know Tielemans and Anderson were mainstays in my Telegraph team last year, and I quite like the fact that people can look at them as different options. But I'm not sure about people talk about, we're going to be counting tackles and recoveries and stuff. And sure, you can if you want to, but I mean, people count live BPS bonus points and stuff anyway. So I'm sure we'll find something weird to count that most people watching the football game, if you sort of exclaim in the he's hit this passing tier, like, well, what are you talking about? Get a funny
Can
look,
you?
get a
I
funny
mean,
looks
can
from
you
my
imagine
friends,
a 3-0 game and basically your defender is on 9. He's sitting on 9 CBITs, and that's a different level of watching the game or enjoying the game. So I'm sure some people will do it.
I cheered very hard at, I think it was Douglas Luiz got a yellow card that brought his suspension forward, a game that meant he played in the blank game against Sheffield, and it was when I was wild carding. I was at the pub I was at an FPL meetup actually, and I just audibly cheered at a Douglas Luiz yellow card while they were losing to Arsenal, and I thought, this is great. This is
why we play.
So stupid, but so I don't know.
Excellent. This is
also some promoted teams might come in and have a few players as well to look at. We'll see.
No, very helpful charts. I think you're right in the way of sort of the yellow highlights of basically thinking about output versus this higher floor, and basically trying to get into the top right of that, on how much can you basically get a high floor plus a little bit of attacking for the midfielder. So very helpful. Where did you get the numbers from? The past numbers?
I think they're all on FBRF Optadata.
Okay.
FBRF Optadata. And then you can work out CBIT thresholds and stuff. I know a few other places have posted them. I know Scout have got a lot of this data as well. But they're freely available on FBRF. Is a really good resource for anyone who wants lots of data tables that look like this. Sometimes you can pull it together, but they've got all the Optadata. Yeah.
All right.
Yes,
We've
should give them their credit.
Yeah, let's get to our final section, which is basically quick thoughts on pricing. Like, we're not going to go do a deep dive on FPL pricing and go through every player, but
I've got my first draft here. Have you got? No, not yet.
Not yet. Yeah.
So I've brought Wirtz up here. These again. Thank you to Rob T for the graphics. These are, I guess, kind of an example of also showing the way that we're trying to think about projecting players in the Solio Analytics model, in terms of it being like team goals first, and then players kind of get a share of those. It makes sure things are coherent. So if I think Salah's going to get a goal and Gakpo's going to get a goal and Wirtz is going to get a goal, then I need to be careful doing that too much, because then I think Liverpool are going to get 3. And that's quite high.
Every game.
So, yeah. So I think, again, Wirtz is a really interesting one, partly because he's such an expensive player, he's such a good player, he's such an exciting new player. He's joining arguably the best team in the league, certainly the team who won it last year. He's joining an attack with one of the best players, with Mo Salah. Yeah, and I think that attack's been quite fluid around Mo for a few seasons. I know we had that point where it was, Mane, Firmino and Salah pretty much most weeks. Got quite, not rigid, but it was, you knew what to expect. Whereas past few seasons, it's been quite a few different players who've come in and changed shape even. Sometimes they've played with Szoboszlai as like a 10. And Wirtz is very flexible, so he can play in quite a few different positions. So I think on the screen, actually, you can see we've taken some positional assumptions. So if he plays centre forward all the time, then we're going to think he's going to be scoring more goals because he's closer to goal, and centre forward tend to get more of the goals. If he plays out wide on the left, that's going to be slightly different. His role is going to be a bit different. So I think where he's going to play will have an impact on his projected goals and projected assists. Obviously, that's going to vary game to game. It's going to depend on who else is playing with him. If they're playing with 4 attackers instead of 3 attackers, a front 4, front 3. So I think the uncertainty is quite wide here. You can kind of see we've got a distribution of the goals and the assists and kind of where they come from. So again, I think I've talked about this a bit before about trying to put ranges on people, or on players, on teams. So Liverpool are going to be projecting, a little over 2 goals a game on average. They're not going to be 1 would be too low, 4 would be too high. You might debate between high 1.8 to 2.2 to 2.4, 2.5, but markets are kind of putting them around this range. And again, an attacker like Wirtz is not going to be getting 30 to 40%. He's unlikely to be taking penalties, which is another sort of, that's a big boost. That's a kind of 7-8% goal share boost. And you can actually see his assist rate is kind of like slightly stretched. It's a bit unsure how much his creative force is going to be, which is depending on the position he's playing in. So the numbers at the top, the headline numbers of about 0.31 projected goals, 0.34 projected FPL assists. So fantasy assists, that is different to Opta. That's including the fantasy assists too. Is kind of like the central expectation of this distribution. So if he puts up a season where he starts playing, he's putting up 0.4 of both of them, then I think the way people might talk about it is like, oh, the model was wrong. But it's almost like, okay, well, that's just the higher end of the range that it was projecting, and it was less likely for that to happen. He might put up 0.2 in each of these markers. He might be much more of a goal threat and much less of an assist threat if he's playing more as a forward. He might be, if he's playing as a 10, vice versa. So it's really just to kind of get a benchmark idea of where this guy sits. So I think I'm going to put these numbers up against the guys.
And I just want to add, basically, what the model is doing, or how it's being projected, is what people are doing in their brain.
Yeah.
Who don't use models anyway. Like, they're thinking, okay, he's going to play some minutes off the left. He may play some minutes as the 10. He may get 70 minutes some games. He may get 60 minutes some games. Some games he may play 90. You're all doing the math in your head anyway. This is just doing the same thing, but in a projection where it will also update. This is why using market odds will be great, because in 3 weeks, if he scores, then the markets will start to say, okay, his goal share maybe isn't 15% or 20%. It's a little bit more than that. Which does it mean that Gakpo's goal share has come down, or Salah's goal share has come down, or Liverpool have just become a better team and they're scoring one extra goal every single game? So it's a dynamic thing, is basically what I wanted to.
Yeah, and we become a bit more sure of the positional assumptions. Maybe he is playing all over the place, and we need to keep these kind of like spread positional shares, or maybe he plays the first 5 games as the centre forward, and we go, okay, well, again, this is the uncertainty point we made before. Is that like
Exactly.
it's not just who's going to be injured, who's going to be playing. It's where are these guys going to be playing? How are they going to fit together? How are the tactical things going to change? My assumption on how good Wirtz is now is unlikely to be the same in 3 weeks' time because I'll have all this information. Maybe he doesn't start the first 3 game weeks and he comes off the bench, and it's unlikely, but it's a plausible scenario. We don't know what's going to happen, but we can still put it in ranges and put levels of certainty on it, and this uncertainty level is quite high at the start. So I think anyone who's making these big bold claims about this is how it's going to be, this is how it's going to be, this is how it's going to be, they don't know. None of us know. I don't know. Like this is still an educated guess, but you can get an idea of the range of plausible outcomes and how likely they are. So if all that mainly to do is to kind of benchmark them against, like, okay, if I want to compare, should I buy Wirtz or should I buy this other guy who's the same price, or is the pairing of Wirtz and the cheap striker better than Watkins and the cheap mid? And these are the kind of pairwise comparisons that we try to make when we're picking our team. If I can get a rough central expectation for Wirtz for these, then I can see how close those comparisons are. If the lower end of Wirtz means that the comparison still is like Wirtz is the best pick, then I don't need to worry about where he sits in that range too much. I know that even at the lower end, he's a good pick. If I see that, vice versa, if I see that at the top end of his range, he's not a good pick, then I don't need to worry about it at all, and I can focus my attention on trying to put players in the right position within these ranges and teams in the right position within their ranges and so on. But as you can see, Wirtz plays pretty highly against like Luis Diaz and Son and De Bruyne. So obviously he's below Salah's kind of league of his own. I think that's why he's priced so highly. It makes sense. Palmer and Saka again are kind of that point behind him, and then there's a little gap, and then there's these guys around 0.6 expected goal involvements or fantasy goal involvements. We get lots of different terms now. But the guys who Son we've known has been very good. De Bruyne has been very good for a while. Luis Diaz has been very good for a while. But the guys who also have the kind of like breakout good seasons, so we know Eze had a very good season, Jacob Murphy had a very good season. Dango Ouattara's on here. He plays a lot of minutes at number 9, so actually his goal, we can see his goals are quite high. Ismail Assar had a very good season. So we're expecting him to be up there with these best mids in the game. He's probably not going to be as good as Palmer and Saka, but he might be. There's a chance that they get that good, or one of them drops off. Maybe it's time for. I suppose Saka missed a lot last season, but Palmer was a bit hit or miss. Maybe he doesn't carry on. He was good at the World Cup, at the Club World Cup. But Wirtz, I think at 8.5 is kind of, it's maybe a little low, but he's also not going to be really hitting these clearances, blocks, interceptions, tackles that like a Bruno Fernandes at 0.55 does tend to hit quite well. So Bruno is 9 and Wirtz is 8.5, and if you were purely going like who's in the better team and who's the the better player or offensive output, then I think most people would probably. Wirtz is a new player to the league; he might not necessarily adapt, but Bruno Fernandes is the kind of player who's what he does is rewarded by fantasy games really well, whereas Wirtz is a very strong ball progressor, which is very important for teams getting that ball up the pitch, but you don't get points for that. So it's quite a hard one to judge. He's a new player. It's very exciting. I think 8.5 is maybe a little low. I might have gone for 9 or 9.5, but it's hard to say. I think the choice is like if he gets off to a flying start, his price will go up quite quickly. He'll suddenly be 9 by game week 4 or 5 anyway. So I think it'll correct itself if it's wrong. I don't think there's really any prices that I thought were like way off. The ones that are maybe 0.5 out tend to fix themselves quite quickly because everyone's very active at the start. But what do you make of it?
No, I think Wirtz is, I agree, slightly underpriced, but then at the same time, I also think, given that the pricing has been fair for most of the attackers, that it's also okay to say maybe he's not somebody you start with. So I mean, these are not contradictory,
Yeah.
that you can be a little bit underpriced, but still you, because the error bars are high, right? We've said this, like you can be completely off on both ends with where you are with words. So you can also say, I'm going to be a little bit conservative and see if he's somebody I need to jump on. Because the good thing about Liverpool is in the first three fixtures, it's only game week 1 which is really the banker high expected points game. I think the second and third are ones where maybe you take that time, you watch, and then you say, okay, this guy is somebody who I really want or not, because then Liverpool's fixtures actually improve. So from that point of view, I don't mind the price. I think generally the attacking pricing has been right. Penalty takers have got a little bit of a bump, which is also good to see. Talismans in good teams have got a bump. So yeah, I don't think apart from defenders, where I felt premium defenders could have been maybe 0.5 higher, it's been quite all right.
Yeah, I think again with someone like Verts, who's maybe someone where our error bars are wider and the range is wider, then maybe that's again plugging our method of thinking again. But playing with uncertainty is actually like, okay, if I don't start with him, but it turns out he's at the top end of this range, like what do I do? Do I have a way back to him? Do I have to play my wild card to get to him? If I go for, Kirkez and Virgil and Salah, and it seems by game week 4 that Verts is playing number 9 and he's playing 90 minutes a game, then I might be a bit stuck. I might have to play the wild card. I might have to use some transfer. I might have to take some hits because he's suddenly at the top end of the range. But equally, maybe I need to plan for, if I start with him and it turns out he's at the bottom end of the range, what do I do? So actually having plans in case for each of these scenarios, it's not just player injuries, it's actually like player performances and levels, and trying to set up in a way that maybe I can pick a team that allows me to get to Verts once I have the information in 3 weeks, or make a decision in 3 weeks' time. Same with starting with him. Maybe I start with him and I have a plan that if it, I don't have to follow it exactly, but I might have him for the first 3 or 4, and if he's not working, I can swap to Bruno Fernandes or something like that. So I might want to leave the 0.5 spare or vice versa. And this is usually where the early wild cards get played, is because we get 3 or 4 weeks in and enough has changed with some of the players that we own and don't own in terms of what we've updated our priors on and our thoughts on how good they are. And we're not able to make those changes all in one go. So we play the wild card to do it. Some of it is, targeting fixture swings and stuff. Like people have good runs for the first 3, and then maybe a wild card in 4 to play out of it. But historically, I think that's normally why a wild card gets played early, is that the team was inflexible and needed enough changes that I couldn't do it with transfers, and I was going to get enough of an edge from playing the wild card. You also can, you can gain price changes from it as well and various other things. But I think if you want to try and play it a bit later, then making sure your team is set up structurally in a way that allows you to move around these different points of information in terms of the first 3, the first 3 games of the season are probably the points of information that are the most informative 3 games. If you were to pick a random 3-game sample, 3 games are still very small, but seeing how these teams are setting up and how they're playing, and the transfer window will shut around that point as well, so we can actually evaluate who's in the squad, that kind of thing. I think we've also got I've got Brian Mbomo here, who's another interesting signing. He's come in at 8 million. I think when they released the game, he hadn't actually moved to Man United, so he was on the Brentford side, but he was going to play for, I think the deal was all but done. I can't remember when it was official but not official, or I didn't follow it too much. What do you think?
I think it was known by then
Yeah.
that he'd be moving.
So what we've done, again, the positional assumptions where it feels much more likely that, we know Amorim's system is this sort of 3-4-3, and Brian's probably going to be playing one of these like attacking mid just off the striker roles. But there's a small chance he could play it as a wing back if he's needed, or Ahmad plays further forward, or I'm not entirely sure. But we're a bit more sure about his position, but maybe less sure about his penalties. Is he going to take penalties off whilst Cunha's joined as well, Bruno Fernandes, he had penalties at Brentford. I know you're a Man United fan. Do you have an opinion? Who takes pens for you?
I think he'll be an avoid, to be honest. Like it's a case of him having had he been at Brentford and nothing would have changed, like Thomas Frank staying and everything else being the same, he would have been way more than 8 million. I think he would have been the 9 million ish, especially given the,
Yeah,
dare I say, overperformance last year, or very good performance, but slightly overperformance as well.
good finishing.
But I think with Man United, yeah, yes, good finishing. So good. Um, with Man United, he's unlikely to be the talisman. This is reflected here. 20% goal share means that the markets don't really think that he will take pens. Bruno should keep them, or they share it around. Bruno's known to be charitable as well. There was a time where he was sharing them with Rashford. Cunha is pretty greedy as well, so you just never know where that lands. So set pieces is another one. Mbumo's really good with his left foot, so he takes corners on one side for Brentford, takes set pieces. Whether he continues to do that, because Cunha is amazing at set pieces as well. So we will see. And I think in this case, classic example of error bars are so high, fixtures are so bad, or not that great, that you just go, you know what, I'm just gonna wait and see on this and see if 8 million is too low. I suspect not.
Yeah, so just for audio listeners, we're predicting around 0.25 projected goals and 0.26 projected FPL assists, which on this table you can see is a bit further down. It's a bit more around, Garnacho, who's sort of replacing Foden, Johnson, Szoboszlai, and Mbeumo from last season. So we're predicting him actually a little bit lower on the whole, which makes sense because, if he's losing penalties, maybe against some set piece share, I think Man United's attack is probably still a little bit better than Brentford's, but maybe not too dissimilar. Hopefully a lot better with these new signings, and obviously Brentford's getting a bit worse with losing these players. There's sort of all this kind of, Brentford is worse because Brian's gone, and now Man United are better, but then does that mean Brian's better? And that's all very complicated. But a bit further down, he's kind of like more like these kind of winger roles. Bowen is around here, Martinelli, Trossard, Gordon. I'm just reading names out now. Gordon, Mitoma. But he's like a sort of echelon quality down in terms of his actual output. So he is cheaper. He's 8 million instead of 8.5. But it might need to be a run where maybe we find out he is on penalties, or Cunha or Bruno are suspended, or something like that, where we know that he's taking more of an attack. There's a chance he could play as the number 9. I think it's probably unlikely, but I think he's probably going to be one where there's moments where he makes sense to be in the team, but he's not going to be one in consideration all the time. But we'll see. I mean, it surprise us. I mean, he might just suddenly start putting all these. Man United might suddenly start challenging for Europe, and we'll see. We'll find out. But I think there's quite a few players like this. I think the new signing Cunha is probably fairly similar to Mbeumo here, but just not the example we used.
Exactly.
So there's quite a few players to keep an eye on. But I think there's enough players to keep an eye on who are more exciting. Sadly, I really enjoyed owning Brian Mbeumo in fantasy last year. I think I bought him in game week 3 and had him all the way to the end. He was very good. But there's also
lots of darlings.
There's players who are about this good, who we're more sure of how good they're going to be. Who also have better fixture runs and maybe play for slightly better teams. So
exactly,
we'll see.
Exactly. Excellent. I think we will leave it there. This was a lot longer than we'll normally go, but this was the first part. We have a lot to talk about. All these new rules. Exactly. Going forward, we'll basically talking a lot more about players, about our team strength, and how we're projecting expected points. So it'll be sort of we'll tie it up to the model itself. But this has been very, very, very useful, Johnny. I shouldn't say thank you for joining, because you'll be joining every week. But it was a pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you for being on as well. Yes. I'm looking forward to doing more of these. I think this should be good.
Yeah, hopefully the viewers and listeners have enjoyed it, and we will see you again. We'll do a few of these in pre-season, so see you again for the next one.
See you again soon.
Thank you.